Clay Shirky explains how institutions will try to preserve the problem to which they are the solution, where with reference to Joseph Tainter's theory, he explains how historical societies have built themselves up so far that there is no going back, and the only way to downsize is to collapse and restart all over again. Shirky is suggesting that businesses are stubborn in their ways and how they do not want to move into newer ideas to create income because they are not prepared to restart and build themselves back up again. It could be said that there is a power struggle between old physical and new digital ways of producing and distributing music by companies that are still producing and selling hard copies of music, such as vinyl or compact disc. Such companies may be considered stubborn by not moving into the digital age, but other factors would have to be accepted, such as the loss of jobs for employees who make the hard copies, the loss of jobs on high streets, and possibly a considerable amount of consumers would be lost by the move. The digital side of the music industry now has to compete within itself because renting large amounts of music with a one-off fee is now readily available through programs such as Spotify, instead of paying to own just a single or an album of a certain artist. Another area that can be looked at is how some people who were originally passive consumers are now becoming prosumers because of a mass collaboration online and the way music technologies are changing. Both the physical and digital markets may be pushing the already undecided consumers to create their own music, instead of embracing and taking advantage of it by selling samples and/or video tutorials to help the consumers produce music for themselves. The frequent changes within the music industry make it unpredictable and difficult to determine whether or not the evolving digital platforms will always be the means by which people will continue to access or purchase their music. However, some companies which produce hard copies are continuing with their ways of music production and/or distribution because they anticipate that a move into the digital music industry will result in losses associated with jobs, shops, and consumers. Dr. Smith recommends that if you want something to be 10 times cheaper, take out 90% of the materials. However, if you replace materials for labour, it can be seen that in relation to the music industry, hard copy companies that are trying to compete with digital companies would have a lot to lose in relation to the amount of skilled employees needed to make up these companies, who would then be made redundant. For example, the amount of employees needed to make up a digital company is very minimal compared to the amount needed for a vinyl company. Companies that produce hard copies, such as vinyl, may continue to be obdurate in their ways of distributing music because of the potential for considerable loss whilst competing with already established companies like iTunes, who prove to be challenging. Digital sales have now overtaken the sale of other recorded forms of music. However, vinyl records continue to be sold across the world and, for example, sales in Australia have increased by at least 77%. From these statistics, it can be seen that some people still like to have that feeling of owning a physical copy of a piece of music, something that the person can hold in their hands to justify their purchase, instead of simply having a digital copy that is stored on their computer. Even though the music industry is widely available online, the rise in vinyl sales demonstrates that people are still buying hard copies of their favourite artists, even though there may be an easier means to access the same content on the internet. In addition, consumers may just be buying the same music on different platforms, whether it is retro to digital or vice versa, by consequently stockpiling the same records just in different forms. With their sales in hard copies still on the increase, it could therefore make the music industry less digital and as easily available as believed because there is as many physical as there are digital copies being purchased. It seems that consumers are interested in getting more for their money when it comes to renting or paying for music, so that the need to own a piece of music is not quite as necessary. The possibility to rent music is even easier and cheaper than ever before through computerized programs such as Spotify. Through such programs, a certain premium is paid and the listener will stream the music over the internet, and can then enjoy as many songs as the service can provide without the need to own any of the music. As rental and non-ownership becomes more and more popular, musicians may struggle in the future to earn as much money from their music as anticipated. Another reason musicians are struggling to profit as much from their music is from illegal downloading, where some individuals search the internet to get free items as opposed to paying for music. However, one advantage musicians could take from the illegal downloads and streaming of their music is that they are still getting the recognition and publicity that they want for free, even though they are not being paid for their music to be heard. It has been suggested that people do not see the need to buy a physical copy or download a digital copy of a piece of music when they could just go online and get it freely, but illegally. Musicians may have to accept the idea that their music may have sold better without the internet, but because of social medias and the fan base acquired from these, there may be a better way for musicians to profit. As a result of such publicity, fans may be more inclined to see them live in concert, purchase merchandise at their events, and thus open up different ways for musicians to generate income without having to worry about music sales. Ticket sales and band merchandise could be the approach musicians have to take to earn the majority of their money if companies such as Spotify, with streaming services, take over from companies like iTunes, where music is purchased and owned. With the internet and technology allowing many people to see that they have the opportunity to be open-minded and expressive, people like to use these ideas to become creative. Through creativity online, it allows people to think for themselves and become active in the decisions that they make. From a music point of view, with newer technologies, it has helped people to become more creative in producing their own pieces because they have all the tools they need to do it. Consumers may be pushed in the direction of creating their own music because they are not willing to pay a certain amount of money to buy a track when it can be easily accessed for free online. Gear says DRM actually acts as an incentive for people to pirate music instead of buying it. DRM, otherwise known as digital rights management, is pushing consumers to illegally pirate music because of the amount of restrictions they have on digital copies. Some of these pirated tracks, or samples, could be used to help consumers produce their own music. If both digital and physical companies were to take advantage of consumers making their own music by selling samples, tutorials, or even creating music programs of their own, they would not need to worry about whether their music was being sold because they would generate income elsewhere as well as satisfying consumer needs. There are many ways in which individuals can benefit themselves by manipulating music, whether it is by creating new music, by altering music that has already been released, or simply just downloading or streaming music from the internet. Through the ideas of recreating and altering music, the consumers are now becoming the prosumers. People have realised that they do not need to just sit back and become a passive consumer. They can actually stand up and think and create for themselves. Through the ideas of the increasing physical to digital sales, from ownership of music to renting music, and passive consumers now becoming prosumers, it can be seen that there is a certain struggle going on within the music industry's production and distribution. However, even though the rise in digital sales has exceeded physical sales, such changes are not reflected in the sale of vinyl recordings, which have increased, and with Australia's rise of 77% over the past few years, suggests that people are still willing to purchase different formats of music. Even though people are buying music, many more are also renting music through streaming services, which in turn may be affecting the overall sales of digital copies. Passive consumers that were once more accepting of the means by which music was obtained are now a lot more interactive in their ways of thinking and believe that it is necessary to be freely creative through the power of the internet. Therefore, there may be less of a power struggle happening between physical and digital companies in the way that they distribute and produce music, but more of a competition to see who can sell the most copies of music or earn the most amount of money. Both companies will always have their own consumers because they all have their advantages and disadvantages, which will appeal to some people and not to others. It could be said that through moving into a digital age has created a power struggle between consumer and producer because of the ease to access content illegally online without having to purchase it through digital companies. However, if the move to digital had not occurred and only hard copies were being sold, there would be a lot less music sales because the distribution of music through the internet has changed the ease of availability. Whilst the surge in digital sales is rapidly climbing and taking over from physical sales, institutions like vinyl record companies are persevering through such times of austerity because they are willing to accept the fact that there are always going to be people who will want to be part of their retro-style production.